The class of 2019 was one of the most hyped up classes in recent memory, featuring several talented names and some of the most viral players in the history of high school basketball. And believe it or not, it has already been half a decade since ESPN released their rankings for the top 100 players of 2019. So at this point, many of the players are now finishing up their college careers or already have a few NBA seasons under their belts. With this in mind, I thought now would be a good time to look back on the top 10 players in the class and analyze how their basketball careers have turned out. Did they all live up to the hype they had coming out of high school, or would most of them wind up falling short of expectations? If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more sports content. Now with all that out of the way, let's get started. Coming in as the number 10 ranked player on ESPN's 2019 Top 100 is small forward out of Rainey High School, Scottie Lewis. In his senior year of high school, Scottie averaged a solid 17 points and 4.8 rebounds, and alongside his teammate Brian Antoine, the two made up one of the best backcourts in high school basketball. At the conclusion of his high school career, Scottie would go on to play his college ball at the University of Florida, where he would put up a solid freshman season, averaging 8.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, to go alongside a steal and block per game. Despite being a fringe NBA draft prospect after his freshman year, he thought he had a little bit more to show scouts and could improve his draft stock, and thus decided to come back for his sophomore season. Unfortunately, this would wind up being a costly mistake, as his stats would actually see a slight decrease across the board. But although his stock did take a slight hit, he was still considered a draftable prospect, and in an effort to prevent his stock from potentially getting even worse by doing another year in college, he'd instead take his losses and declare for the NBA draft, where he'd be selected in the second round with the 56th pick by the Charlotte Hornets. He'd split time between the NBA and the G League, not really being a major contributor with either team. And after his contract with the Hornets was up, he since struggled to stay on G League rosters, let alone make an NBA roster, being waived by 3 different teams while at the same time struggling with some injuries. As of now, he's signed with the Salt Lake City Stars, and this next season will be a big one for him, as it's likely his last shot to make an impression and keep his NBA dreams alive. Coming in as the number 9 ranked player in the class of 2019, we have Italian-born point guard Nico Mannion out of Pinnacle High School. From a media perspective, Nico was arguably one of the most well-known and highly covered players in the class, with countless highlights of him found all over social media at the time. And his senior year of high school certainly was a highlight reel, with his averages of over 30 points, 6 assists, and 6 rebounds a game. Following his dominant senior season, Nico would play his collegiate hoops at the University of Arizona, where he was able to make an instant impact for them, finishing his freshman year averaging 14 points, 5 assists, and 2.5 rebounds. His shooting numbers weren't the greatest, but scouts weren't really too concerned about that because his talent was undoubtedly there. With this in mind, Nico would strike while the iron was hot and declare for the NBA draft, being picked up in the second round with the 48th pick by the Golden State Warriors. His NBA career, however, would be incredibly short, spending just one season with the Warriors in which he received very limited playing time and struggled mightily with his shooting. After his rookie season, he'd go on to sign a contract in the Italian League, and as of today, he's still playing overseas. Given that he's kinda just another guy in the Euro League, the odds of him making an NBA comeback seem very slim, but he still does possess loads of talent and has a lot of room to develop, so the potential for a return to the NBA is always a possibility. Hailing from the prep school powerhouse of IMG Academy, the number 8 ranked player in the class of 2019 was shooting guard Josh Green. In his final year at IMG, Green would lead his squad to a national championship, and although I wasn't able to track down any of his stats from that year, given he was one of the top 10 players in the class, you can probably assume his stats are pretty good. For college, he'd wind up signing with the University of Arizona, teaming up with just previously discussed Nico Mannion, making up one of the best freshman classes in the country. In his freshman season for the Wildcats, he wasn't quite the same level of scorer Nico was, but he was a little more well-rounded, averaging 12 points, 4.6 rebounds, 2.5 assists, and over a steal per game. Not only that, but he was a more efficient player and was also a much more impressive overall athlete, and as such would be viewed as a much more intriguing and highly touted prospect after he declared for the draft, and he'd wind up being selected with the 18th pick by the Dallas Mavericks. He'd see very limited action his first couple seasons in the NBA, but in his third season would solidify himself as a key piece in the rotation, averaging 9 points on 40% shooting from behind the arc, and his role has continued to grow season by season, averaging 26 minutes a game this most recent year for the Mavericks, and even stepping in as a starter for a decent amount of games. He's overall been a really steady and efficient player in the Mavs rotation, and his ability as a perimeter shooter makes him a valuable asset in today's NBA. I'm very excited to see how much he continues improving, and if he doesn't end up staying in Dallas long term, I certainly think he'll be a key piece for whatever team he might end up playing for. Ranking as lucky number 7 in ESPN ESPN's Top 100 Players of 2019 is power forward Jaden McDaniels out of Federal Way High School, who had a very strong senior season, averaging 23 points, 10 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game. Given his guard-like skill set to pair with his 6'9" frame, Jaden was a highly touted prospect with offers from all the high major blue blood schools. However, despite having the option to play wherever he wanted, he decided to stay close to home and play his college ball for the University of Washington. And as a freshman, he lived up to his 5-star status coming out of high school, averaging 13 points, almost 6 rebounds, and over 1 block per game his first collegiate season. And after being projected as a potential first-round prospect, Jaden would declare for the draft, eventually being selected with the 28th pick by the Los Angeles Lakers, and then traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves. His first few seasons in the NBA, he'd gradually see improvements in his game and stats, earning himself a bigger and bigger role each season, eventually having a career year in Season 3, averaging over 12 points and 4 rebounds on very efficient shooting splits. Unfortunately for McDaniels, he is kinda in a weird situation right now, being on a team with 2 ball-dominant players in Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns. So I feel his ceiling as a player, and especially as a scorer, is kinda capped, since there's only so many shots to go around. And that reality is already being seen, with his scoring and role in the offense all taking a step back this most recent season. Selfishly, I am very curious to see how good he'd be if given a more featured role on a different team, but being as he recently signed a 5-year contract to stay in Minnesota, I certainly think he'll be a key piece for them moving forward as they contend for championships. At the number 6 spot in the class of 2019, we have center Vernon Carey Jr. by way of Nova Southeastern University. The first thing you'll likely notice about Vernon is his imposing frame, measuring in at 6'10", 270 pounds, and he used his size to dominate in the post his final year of high school, averaging 21 points, 9 rebounds, and over a block per game. And after deciding to play his college ball at Duke, he would be just as dominant, averaging almost 18 points, 9 rebounds, and over a block and a half per game for the Blue Devils, earning National Freshman of the Year honors. After declaring the draft following his freshman season, many might make the assumption based on his stats and physical frame that he would be a lock as a lottery pick. However, this would end up not being the case, and his size would actually work against him quite a bit, with many scouts calling out his lack of quickness, foot speed, and overall athleticism, all things which severely impacted his ability to be effective on an NBA court, especially on the defensive end. As a result, Vernon wouldn't hear his name called until the second round of the draft, being selected with the 32nd pick by the Charlotte Hornets. During his short stint in the NBA, he was a fringe roster type of guy, spending most of his time in the G League, with some occasional NBA action throughout the season. Over time though, it just became clear that he couldn't really hold up in the NBA, and this most recent season, he'd find himself out of the NBA entirely, going on to play overseas in Turkey. Getting to the halfway mark now, the number 5 ranked player in the class of 2019 was point guard RJ Hampton out of Little Elm High School. In his final year of high school, he proved to be absolutely dominant, averaging 32 points, over 9 rebounds, 6 assists, and 4 steals a game. Something to note here is that RJ was technically a junior in the class of 2020 at the time of that season, but given his domination at the high school level, he decided to reclassify to the class of 2019. At the conclusion of his high school career, RJ still hadn't signed to any college, but he had narrowed down his choices to Kansas, Memphis, and Texas Tech. However, he'd eventually make the decision to forgo college entirely and instead sign an overseas deal to play in New Zealand. This was viewed as a pretty risky move for him, and whether it was a smart move or not is certainly up for debate, but either way, he was still projected as a top 5 pick going into the season. And after his first year with the Breakers, he put up averages of 8 points, almost 4 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. After his lone season in New Zealand, RJ would declare for the NBA draft, being selected 24th overall by the Bucks and then traded to the Denver Nuggets. So far in his NBA career, he's had virtually no consistency. In just 3 seasons in the NBA, he's already played for 4 different teams, and in the opportunities he has been given, despite showing some occasional flashes, he hasn't really been able to find his rhythm and has really struggled mightily with his shooting. As of now, he's currently signed to the Wizards G League affiliate, and this upcoming season will be a big one for him, as I believe it's likely his last chance to show the NBA that he belongs on a roster. But if he can tap into his potential and really lock in, there certainly leaves the chance for him to make a return to the NBA. Moving on to the number 4 ranked player in the class of 2019, we have the shooting guard out of Holy Spirit High School, Anthony Edwards. In his final high school season, he put up averages of 29 points to go alongside 9 rebounds, and was an absolute human highlight reel, arguably being the best athlete in the entire class. For college, Edwards would turn down several blue bloods and top college basketball programs and sign with the University of Georgia, being the program's highest-rated recruit of all time. And by the conclusion of his freshman season, he had become one of the best players in all of college basketball and was viewed as a consensus top 5 prospect heading into the draft, with many experts pinning him as a lock for the number 1 pick. And these projections would become reality, as Edwards would be selected by the Minnesota Timberwolves with the first pick in the draft. Now, I'm sure most of you know the story from here, as Ant has become one of the best and most popular players in the NBA, coming off a season in which he averaged 26 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists at just 22 years old. He just has the total package as a player, possessing high-level scoring ability, elite athleticism, alongside a killer mentality and aura of confidence that you simply don't find in many players. His ceiling truly is limitless, and I fully expect him to be a top 5 player in the NBA one day. Coming in as the number 3 ranked player in the class of 2019 is center Isaiah Stewart out of La Lumiere High School. Being in a similar mold to previously discussed Vernon Carey Jr., Stewart did most of his damage on the interior with his imposing size and strength, allowing him to put up averages of 18 points, 11 rebounds, and 3 blocks per game his senior year of high school. Following his high school career, Stewart would wind up signing with the University of Washington, teaming up with fellow top 10 player in the class Jaden McDaniels. And similar to McDaniels, Stewart would make an immediate impact as a freshman, averaging 17 points, almost 9 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game. After declaring for the draft following his freshman year, Stewart would be selected with the 16th pick by the Portland Trail Blazers and then traded to the Detroit Pistons. So far, his NBA career has been pretty polarizing to say the least, as he's mostly remembered for everything besides his actual play on the court. Many might remember his altercation with LeBron a couple years ago, amongst other antics, which has given him a bit of a bad reputation among fans. And that really is unfortunate because he's honestly a pretty solid player for the Pistons, averaging double-digit points the last 2 seasons, alongside being a solid rebounder, averaging over 7 a game. He's even developed a bit of an outside shot as well, hitting threes at a pretty respectable 38% clip. Hopefully fans can begin to look past his previous antics and start to put some more respect on his actual play on the court. It's unlikely he'll ever be an all-star caliber player, but I certainly think he'll be a valuable piece for several seasons for whatever team he plays for. Getting near the end now, the runner-up for best player in the class of 2019 was point guard Cole Anthony, hailing from the basketball powerhouse of Oak Hill Academy. In his senior season, he proved to have an all-around game, averaging a triple-double with 18 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists, the first to ever do so for the program. And for those of you that know about Oak Hill Academy and all the talent that has gone through there over the years, you would know just how impressive of a feat that truly is. For his college hoops, Cole would sign with the University of North Carolina and proceeded to have one of the best freshman debuts in college basketball history, dropping 34 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 assists in his first ever collegiate game. And this would set the tone for the rest of his freshman season, putting up impressive averages of over 18 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. The only major knock on him was his rather low shooting percentages, which stood at 38% from the field and 34% from 3. But in the eyes of NBA scouts, that was something that could be worked on, and he was still highly regarded as one of the best prospects in the draft. He'd wind up being selected just outside of the lottery, being picked up with the 15th pick by the Orlando Magic, with expectations of being the team's point guard of the future. And for the first couple years of his NBA career, he certainly did look to be on that path, averaging over 16 points, 5 assists, and 5 rebounds in his second season. But unfortunately for Cole, since then, things have slowly started to unravel for him, with his stats trending downward the last couple seasons, to the point where he was putting up career low averages across the board in 2023-2024. He's still a very solid player, but the Magic have really loaded up with young talent in recent years, especially at the guard position. And although he signed a 3-year extension last offseason, I do wonder just how much the Magic see him as a key piece moving forward, and if his days in Orlando might be coming to an end sooner rather than later. Next year is going to be a big one for him, and although he certainly has the talent to turn things back around, it also shouldn't come as a surprise if we start hearing his name be floated around trade talks over the course of next season. And finally, coming in as the number 1 recruit in the class of 2019 was the center out of Memphis East High School, James Wiseman. James had been highly regarded as one of the best players in his class since his freshman year of high school, and continued his domination all the way through his senior year, in which he averaged over 25 points, 14 rebounds, and over 5 blocks a game, cementing his status as the number 1 recruit in the country. Following his senior season, Wiseman would sign with the University of Memphis, where his former high school coach Penny Hardaway had recently gotten the head coaching starting job at. However, just 3 games into his freshman season, Wiseman would run into controversy regarding alleged previous under-the-table payments between him and head coach Penny Hardaway, and this controversy eventually led to the NCAA ruling Wiseman ineligible for the rest of the season. The situation would make its way into court, and after a messy string of legal disputes and back and forth, Wiseman would eventually make the decision to leave Memphis, effectively ending his collegiate career, and instead opting to train on his own to prepare for the upcoming NBA draft. Despite his small sample size in college, Wiseman was still viewed as one of the top prospects in the draft, eventually going on to be selected with the 2nd pick in the draft by the Golden State Warriors. Now, for one reason or another, as many know, his time in Golden State would be highly disappointing. There's several videos out there that can give more in-depth explanation on his situation in Golden State, but long story short, he just ended up not really being a good fit for them. Despite showing numerous flashes his first couple years there, he was just never really able to nail down a consistent role, and the Warriors would eventually make the decision to ship him out to the Detroit Pistons. And it's kind of been a very similar situation there as well. He'll have his occasional highlights in games where he flashes his potential, but overall, he hasn't played even close to the level of a number 2 overall pick. He is still very young and has all the tools to turn his career around, but overall, I think he's very quickly entering territory as one of the biggest draft busts in recent memory. So that was the top 10 high school recruits of 2019 and where they are now. As things currently stand, with the exception of Anthony Edwards, none of the players have really been able to live up to the hype given to them coming out of high school, with most of them settling into role player status or being straight up bust in the NBA. This is just another example of how hard it is to succeed in the NBA, and that stars and rankings coming out of high school really don't mean anything. At the end of the day though, all these players still have loads of talent and are very young, so hopefully at least a few of them will be able to turn things around over the next few seasons. Be sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe to the channel for more sports content. If you have any thoughts on the players in this video, or have suggestions for future videos, be sure to leave them in the comments down below. This is HCP signing off. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'm out.